to Cannabis Health Radio, where we share powerful, real-life stories from people around the world who are using cannabis as medicine. The goal of this podcast is to raise awareness of the healing potential of cannabis and is not intended as medical advice. And now, here's your host, Ian Jessup.
Welcome to the Cannabis Health Radio podcast. I'm Ian Jessup. When pharmaceuticals failed her young son, who suffered life-threatening seizures, our guest today made a bold choice that would change both their lives forever. Turning to medical cannabis, she not only helped her son achieve living seizure-free, but also discovered a new purpose as an educator and advocate. And joining us from Quebec, Canada is Shauna Dunbar, the co-founder of Educann Nation, Cannabis Education, a nonprofit working to make cannabis knowledge accessible, responsible, and patient-centered. Shauna, thanks for doing this. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'd like to take a moment also to thank you for doing this show because as an educator, for me, I often refer my patients to listen to people's stories to find hope. And that's something that is, you know, we tend to not find a lot of in this world today. So thank you so much for giving hope to other people through the work you do.
Well, thank you. So you started smoking a hash joint at the age of 12. You were a bit of a rebel, weren't you?
I guess so. Never really thought of it that way, but yeah, always willing to try something new, and I certainly enjoyed it.
Yeah. Shauna, you have a fabulous story, and it's so interesting because I read what you sent me, and it was really emotional. And I want you to take listeners through your son's predicament and how this all changed your lives forever.
Sure. So my son Shaden had his first seizure when he was 3 years old. We were at a friend's party and he crashed out on the couch around 8:30 with his best little buddy, and I carried him home across the field to our house. And my husband happened to be away on a fishing trip, so both of my children had a sleepover in mom's bed, thankfully, because at, I don't know, somewhere around 6 a.m., I had just let the dog out and then was crawling back into bed next to my son, who was squashed in the middle of myself and my daughter, and suddenly he started to have a seizure. And it was what I was taught was a gros mal seizure. I believe they call them tonic-clonics now. It lasted, I knew I had been trained as a lifeguard, so I knew that as long as the seizure didn't last for more than 5 minutes, it was okay. You know, so I was nice and calm. I woke my daughter up. I said, you know, go call 911 when we reached that 5-minute marker. Mm-hmm. And he seized for over 20 minutes in total. And that's, he just was coming out of it when the ambulance arrived. You know, obviously went straight to the hospital. He was just completely out of it. He was unconscious. And, you know, they were shaking him and trying to wake him up, and he wasn't waking up, and I was being told that he was going to have brain damage because the seizure had lasted so long. And then the poor little guy actually woke up because the nurse broke the needle that she was drawing blood from in his arm. So he had this like stream of blood flowing out of his arm.
How did that happen?
I think she was just nervous and shaking, and she just snapped it in his little arm. So he came to with a trembling little bottom lip, and of course, you know, the healthcare providers there were like, get him to talk, and he has brain damage, he probably can't speak. And I was just like, man, leave him alone. He's exhausted. He just seized for over 20 minutes. Let him relax. And you just broke the needle in his arm. And I looked at him in his eyes, and he had, you know, tears streaming down his face. And I said, are you okay, bud? And he just nodded his head. And I was like, he's fine. Leave him alone. Let him rest.
But they wouldn't look you in the eye, would they? You said when you were traveling to the hospital, and even when you got there, they wouldn't look you in the eye?
No, no, it was like this kid is done for, you know, like,
Oh.
like he's seized for so long that he's going to have brain damage. There's going to be something majorly wrong with him. And I feel we truly are blessed that he didn't suffer any damage at all from that. The test results came back, the scans and everything was perfectly fine. There was no noticeable difference in his personality or anything. He just, it was like this incident had happened. And so, of course, we put him on the medication that they told us to put him on, even though, I don't really like pharmaceuticals. It's not, we tend to do things naturally at home. But when you almost lose your kid, you do what you're told. And I didn't know of any other alternatives at the time. So he was put on a benzo, and that did lessen the frequency of the seizures because he continued to have seizures after that. But it lessened the severity. They were never more than, a minute or 2 minutes on the medication. So
How old was he at
yeah,
the time, Shauna?
he was three. He was three when he had his first seizure.
Okay.
Yeah. And then for the next 4 years, we continued on the medication, and we're continually having to increase the medication because he was still having seizures. And the neurologist was like, our aim is for him to be seizure-free. So we're just going to keep increasing that dose, increasing that dose. So by the time he was 7 years old, he was actually on the maximum dose from what I was told for like an 18 or 19-year-old, and he was still having seizures. So at one point we went in to see our neurologist. She had booked an appointment with us because he'd had another seizure. We got there, and she'd mistakenly booked us because she happened to be on vacation. So we went all the way from the Laurentians into Montreal. It's a little annoying to have traveled so far. So thankfully there was another neurologist there, and she wasn't allowed to bring us into her office because we weren't her patients, So she actually sat on the floor in the hallway with us. And she said, listen, I know you're maxed out on this medication. And I know that your neurologist is wanting to, put you on something else. But let me tell you, if based on the types of seizures that he's having now, they're no longer status epilepticus. He's doing well. It's fairly under control. I wouldn't make the switch myself. And she also helped me understand, she put me in touch with another doctor who helped me understand that he was having side effects from the benzos that he was on. It was affecting his memory. It's not something that they list off. It's one of those minor ones, so they don't tell you about it. And I was like getting frustrated with him because he was, where's your lunchbox? Do you have any homework? These types of questions that a mom's going to ask her kid. And he was always like, I don't know. I can't remember.
Jesus, losing your
I can't remember.
memory. Losing your
Yeah,
memory is not something that is minor. It's a very serious issue, especially for a child that age.
exactly. And, as a parent, it was like my frustration with him um, was that he's just not focused, he's just not paying attention. And so we had charts on the fridge, and we did all of these, tried to find tools to help us to help him stay on top of things. But really it was an adverse effect of the pharmaceutical medication he was taking. And I was told by the doctor that I met with that it's permanent damage, so what's that going to be like in the long term for a child who is, potentially going to be on this medication for the rest of their lives? Because, epilepsy doesn't usually resolve itself, right? So what's he going to be like as an adult? Is he going to have any memory at all? So that was a big fear for me. And that's what really got me into researching alternatives. What natural alternatives are there out there that are going to have less side effects or no side effects? And in all the research that I did, the only thing that I kept coming across was cannabis, 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 right? And
Yeah.
no information on dosing, on which cultivar to use, on methods of intake. I couldn't find that, you know, specific direction that I needed, especially as a mother, feeling like I'm taking my son's life in my hands doing this. So I had been researching for a couple of years. I was really grateful to have been put in touch with Corey Yelland, was one of the first people who um, was willing to talk to me and tell me that, this might be a very good idea for your son. Like, you're not barking up the wrong tree. And she put me in touch with different people who were willing to, give me as much information as they had, which was not a lot at the time. Um, and then so long story short, I still wasn't feeling comfortable about putting my son on cannabis, and, not having anybody in the medical industry to support me.
It's because we're so brainwashed about cannabis, aren't we? I mean, it's been generation after generation has been told that it's bad, it's not good for you, but you can drink all the booze you want, and that's free. But cannabis, which has never killed anybody in its entire history because it can't, that's illegal. You can't have it. And once people dig into this, quite frankly, it pisses people off because of what we have been blocked from consuming, a plant that has been around since the beginning of time. And all of a sudden, you as a parent realize that your son is heading in the wrong direction with pharmaceuticals, and it's going to impact his life negatively. And so you're searching for cannabis. Tell us how you got into it, and what was he taking?
And she said, no, no, there's none left. I've been baking, boiling, and stealing your son's medication for the last 6 months. Setting as well. Why didn't she tell me 6 months ago? And then she came out from the back of the room with what she had been sent from Health Canada as to how to deal with this lack of a medication whose withdrawal symptoms can be deadly, right? Here I am faced with, okay, there's none left of his medication. What am I supposed to do now? Thankfully for us, I always kept an extra month's worth of medication because I was always terrified about what if there's none left if the withdrawal symptoms are deadly. So she offered us three different medications, one to deal with the withdrawal symptoms, and two more to try to control the epilepsy. That's a lot to go from one medication that we weren't comfortable with to three, and the side effects were like one of them. The side effect, most common side effect, was suicide, depression, and suicide. Right in
Oh,
my case, and the other one was irreversible liver damage. So we would have to bring him in to have blood tests done every 6 weeks or so, at which point we would only know the liver damage is there after it occurs. So I just looked at her and I was like, no, 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 this is not okay with me. I got home, I counted the pills that we had left. I had exactly enough if I started weaning him that night to do it safely. So I started weaning him, no matter, what the consequence might be. At least he's not going to die from the withdrawal symptoms. And I got on the phone with every person I knew who had anything to do with cannabis. Within 3 days, we were traveling, like 14-hour day of traveling into Ontario to meet with a friend of a friend who was a veteran and had his prescription. and he was willing to put his prescription, well, a portion of his prescription aside for my son. And so he gave us some high CBD, some high THC. We made a 1-to-1 tincture out of that, and that's what I started Shaden off on. Um, and didn't really have much of an idea of dosing, so went with the golden rule of start low and go slow.
Mm-hmm.
I tried everything out on myself first before I gave it to him. And just as I was weaning him off of the clobazam, I was increasing very slowly the cannabis, and he's never had a seizure since. So I did at one point make a change because I found that during the day I was finding him to be a little bit hyperactive, and I wondered if it was the THC. And Shaden's epilepsy is called benign epilepsy, so meaning it's not caused by brain damage or brain malformation as most epilepsies are caused by.
Mm-hmm.
They do react to the same medications. So he only has seizures in his sleep. He's not affected by flashing lights or different sounds or, these types of things that can be triggers for other types of epilepsy. So he doesn't seize during the day. He only seizes in his sleep. So the daytime doses were really about just keeping his endocannabinoid system balanced, like just making sure that it was in his system to keep him supported. So I reduced the amount of THC so that he was really on more of a 20-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC during the day, and at nighttime we stuck with the 1-to-1. He's now been seizure-free for going on 11 years. He now is an adult and utilizes his cannabis as he sees fit. When he was younger, I gave him, I always made his meds for him,
Mm-hmm.
and to keep them enjoyable for him as well. So I would make edibles. I always made sure to put a lot of different spices in those edibles that contain caryophyllene and limonene, because we know that those help tone down the euphoric effects of THC, and I was always afraid of getting him high. I didn't want people to think poorly of me because my kid was stoned. So those were like my backups. So I would make, little dark chocolates. Chocolate also helps support the endocannabinoid system, and I would put chai spices in them and, things like that, so he would enjoy consuming his medicine as well. And he became very good at self-regulating. So I can remember at one point, now I'm not really going to remember how old he was, but
That's okay.
I noticed that I was saying like, hey, bud, like it's time for me I should be making you more meds right now, but I'm looking in the freezer and you're okay for another couple weeks. What's the deal? Have you been forgetting your doses? And he just said, I don't really feel like I need it all the time during the day anymore.
Oh.
And for me, that was like, as a parent, even now as a cannabis educator working with patients, I feel it's so important that we teach people how to listen to their bodies and how to
Mm-hmm.
learn to self-medicate and self-regulate. So he was able to do this even as a child. And he didn't have any more seizures. And even after we got his, the final EEG report from the doctor, when the doctor said, okay, it's been 2 years, like that's a good sign. He's not showing epileptic activity anymore in his brain on the EEGs. You can probably, start weaning him off of the cannabis. My son wasn't ready. He said, I feel like I still need my nighttime dose. And he continued on with that. He wasn't ready to make that change. And I trusted him. And, like you said earlier, it's not going to hurt him.
No, that's right. Does he
You
still
know,
does he still take it today?
yes, he does. Yeah, he consumes regularly. Now he consumes in different forms. He doesn't do edibles as much as he does inhalation.
Mm-hmm.
He has a bong and he rolls himself joints. He takes part still a bit in the growing aspect. It's easy to leave it to mom when mom does all the gardening, but
Yeah.
he does still participate. And I think that that's important as well, that he learned how to grow his medicine and how to process it as well.
How old is he today?
He's almost 20.
Almost 20.
Yeah.
When you introduced him to cannabis, um, this might sound like a dumb question, but could you notice immediately any behavioral changes or any changes within his personality?
The one thing that I can say that was like without a doubt is that his memory got better.
Yeah,
So once he got off of those pharmaceuticals that were impeding his memory improved. And I think that is an important thing to share because often, with all the stigma surrounding cannabis, we're misled to believe that cannabis makes you stupid and that it has a harmful effect on the brain, and especially with children, right? There's not a lot of research around the use of cannabis in healthy kids because it's unethical to do
yeah.
tests on kids who aren't healthy. So we can say, yes, without a doubt, cannabis is helping kids who are managing different diseases, different health conditions. But what does it do to the healthy child's brain? And our governments, our healthcare system, I understand erring on the side of caution, but they're misleading people by saying cannabis can harm the, developing brain of a child. There's no real evidence to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And, yes, my son had epilepsy, but to see that improvement in memory to me is an important piece. It shows that uh, the damage that was caused by a pharmaceutical can potentially be alleviated through the use of cannabis that is, can help cause neurogenesis, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got anecdotal evidence that cannabis works, whereas the pharmaceuticals did not work.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, they worked a little bit. They were a helpful tool while we had access to them. At least I wasn't worried about him dying in his sleep anymore. I
yeah.
slept with him for the first 3 months after his first seizure, and we went back to a baby monitor, and you know,
I was going to
it was
ask you,
terrible.
yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, I mean, that's very traumatic for a parent. And in talking to you, you don't have any gray hair, so.
There's a little in there.
So it's, that's extremely stressful.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I'm, I mentioned earlier, in one breath, I was grateful that my husband wasn't home because had he been home, my son likely would have been in his own bed. And then I would not have known that he was seizing. I would not have been there to resuscitate him. I had to resuscitate him 3 times because he stopped breathing. It was absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Um, and I suppose it probably does come back and haunt me. I know when he falls asleep on the couch in front of the TV or whatever, I still sometimes stick my finger under his nose or watch his eyes.
When you decided to put your son on cannabis, was there any pushback in the medical community?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't say a word about it until we had our legal prescription, which took um, over a year and a half to obtain one because there was no healthcare provider at the time that was willing to touch a pediatric patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And give access. So, um, no, I was, I was terrified to tell anybody about it. We did finally get our prescription through one of those shady cannabis clinics that we stood in line with a gang, all with the same tattoos up their arms on, one side and the other arm, all the same broken arm, and they all walked out with a 30 gram a day script. We walked out with a 20 gram a day script. The doctor just said, "Good job, Mama Bear. Keep doing what you're doing." And then the guys who owned the clinic were trying to buy our prescription off of us when we walked out, right? They're like, well, we got you a 20 gram a day. You don't need that much. So we'll grow it for you. We'll give you what you need. And then, they're going to use the rest to supplement their illegal business. Um, yeah. And then, further down the road, the more I educated myself, the more I understood about, patients' rights and whatnot, and what doctors are, supposed to be required to do as far as supporting you and having conversations. I approached our healthcare provider and said, well, first I approached his neurologist and said, okay, can you do his renewal? Because it's costing me $2,000 a year for a piece of paper and no guidance, no help or anything. Can you please do the renewal? No, I won't do the renewal. And I said, why not? She says, well, I support you, how you're treating your son. He's 100% seizure-free. And I said, yeah, and you're taking part in a study on cannabis for epilepsy. My son is a prime candidate to be a part of that study. You should be including all of the information of, his dosing, what we're doing. Like, this would be important information. And she said, no, he's not eligible to take part in the study because he's using THC. You're not just, doing a CBD isolate, right? And no matter how much education I offered on, there's no long-term studies on isolates. People tend to need higher doses. We get rebound effects. We build tolerances. She didn't want to hear anything about that. So I approached our family doctor, who I knew was prescribing cannabis, mainly in palliative care, but at least she was open to it.
Mm-hmm.
And she flat out refused. She said, I support you. You're doing a great job with your son, but I will not write the prescription. And I said, like, you're going against your Hippocratic oath at this point. Like, you're not even willing to have a conversation with me. We're talking about a renewal here. We're not talking about a new prescription.
Yeah.
What's the deal here? And at that point, I had already started working with another family practice who invited me into their family practice so that I could guide their patients that they wanted to prescribe cannabis to. And she referred me back to the doctors that I was working with. She was like, oh, they'll sign the prescription for you. And I said, it's not okay the way you're treating us. You should be supporting us as our family doctor. And she actually lawyered up against me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Because she didn't like that I was saying, like, you're not respecting my rights as a patient by just blowing me off this way. Like, you're required to write this prescription for us, or you're required to send us to a healthcare provider that is willing to work with us and not charge us for this prescription. And you're just completely blowing us off. So yeah, she lawyered up. Always that kind of pushback. It's sad.
Well, the interesting thing is that I said at the beginning, when you smoked a hash joint at 12, that you're a bit of a rebel. And I love it when people are like that. I mean, there's just so much conformity with the medical system today, and people just have to open their minds and do a little bit of research. It doesn't take a lot with the internet today to find out something. But people get comfortable. They want to rely on their doctors. And not all doctors are bad. I don't want to make that impression. But they're in a box. And they can't get out of that box, that pharmaceutical box, they can't get out of. And I think what you've done is just remarkable, because you've taken your son, who really, I mean, it's frightening to think what he would be like today at, almost 20 years old, being on those pharmaceuticals since he was 3. Yeah. I mean, geez, your brain develops, but your brain doesn't develop with pharmaceuticals in it.
Yeah, exactly. Like we talk about, there's such a fear of cannabis on the developing brain of a child, and yet those same healthcare providers, that same system has no problem feeding children benzos and Ritalins and all of these types of, like, pharmaceuticals that have major effects on the brain, on the behavior of the child, on for sure on the development, but that's okay because it's a pharmaceutical and we're told that
Yeah.
that's what we have to do. I always try to remind patients that, like myself in my position as an educator, um, I'm here to offer advice and you can take it or leave it. I'm here to, share my knowledge with you
Mm-hmm.
and, help you make an informed decision. And guess what? That's what your doctor's role is too.
Yeah. Shauna,
We'll get that.
your personal journey eventually led you to co-found Educann Nation, which talk about that and how you help people understand more about cannabis.
Yeah, well, going along that journey, it was like a roller coaster ride obtaining a prescription and trying to figure things out. And I I remember standing in line with my son who was looking around going, Mama, I thought cannabis was illegal and all these people are smoking joints. Aren't the police going to come? And, because it wasn't recreationally legal at that point. And I explained to him all of that, that no, there is a medical system in place and that's why we're here. And, just because something has been demonized doesn't mean that we need to, doesn't mean it's a bad thing, right? Sometimes society demonizes things and it's a good thing, and
Mm-hmm.
this medicine is a good thing for you. It's helped you become seizure free. But I just thought of like, what if I was somebody else, like some other mom who doesn't, I like to research things. If I'm going to buy a new appliance, I research the heck out of it before I buy it. I
Yeah.
read all the customer reviews. So anything that I'm going to put into my body, anything I'm going to put into my child, I want to research this. But not everybody's like that. We've been conditioned as a society for at least the last century to just do what we're told, that,
Mm-hmm.
our healthcare providers are almost like gods and you just do what you're told. Um, what if I'm one of those people? Where would I be at? Like, this is not okay for me as a mother to be living through this and feeling like I'm the only one educated enough to be making these decisions. Not even the doctor who was prescribing to me had much more to educate me with. So that's when the idea of education came about. In about 2016, I said, well, first of all, our story got shared all over the place, right? I got a
Yeah.
kid who is now seizure free. So people started to come to me and say, can you help me? It started with someone with epilepsy and then someone with arthritis and then someone with this and someone with that. And I was like, geez, I'm not a doctor. I have no business, you know, telling you what to do. But I thought, what if there is some sort of certification that I could do? What if there is a program that I could take and get some sort of, initials after my name and a certificate on my wall to make me feel good about or comfortable about sharing my knowledge with others. So that's what I did. There was nothing available in Canada at the time, so I went to the US. I took the Green Flower program. The one that I took has since been sold off to, it's being given at different universities. So it was a very high level course.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot and thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I did the healer program. And then something came up in Quebec. There was the School of Naturopathy had a short certification course, but another little
Yep.
certification for me to have taken. Um, and that all of that coupled with the doctors in my community who were hearing from patients who were talking with Shauna, you got to talk to Shauna. They were telling their doctors, talk to Shauna, talk to Shauna. I was meeting people at the grocery store and they were saying, my doctor needs to talk to you. And I was like, give your doctor my number. I didn't have a very good opinion of most doctors at that point, right? So they did. They got in touch with me and I said, I'm looking for doctors who are willing to prescribe to my patients that are reaching out to me because I'm sending them to these sketchy clinics where they're spending thousands of dollars for a prescription. I want to work with someone. And they said, well, we want you to come work with us. So that's what I did. They gave me an office space in a family practice, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. that they were willing to do that, in
Oh, yeah.
their landscape of medicine, where it's kind of looked down upon, that they were willing to take that risk. It wasn't a risk; it's their legal right to prescribe, but
Hmm.
they did feel risky about it. They used to always joke about, well, we'll bring you milk and cookies in jail, Shauna, or make sure you bring us milk and cookies when we go to jail. Um, yeah, and so that all of that just led me to want to educate people, to so that they wouldn't have to live through what we went through, that they would have
Yeah.
support and guidance, that they wouldn't have to question, what method of intake, is my 9-year-old smoking joints, what are edibles like, all of these things, that they would have support. And so my thought was, especially at the time, being that there were not really any programs out there for cannabis education certification, I thought, couldn't I gather knowledgeable people together and help standardize the way we speak about cannabis? I feel that that's really important. There's a lot of misinformation. You mentioned earlier, with the internet, we can just look it up, right? Just Google it. But sometimes we come across really bad science
Oh, yeah.
that wasn't done well, right? And navigating uh, good information versus misinformation or disinformation can be very difficult. So I thought it would be wonderful if I could gather other like-minded people together and start training, start exchanging knowledge, um, and hopefully get the good word out there, the good education out there. And I was very grateful to sort of have a little mishap with that, because I originally was uh, getting my nonprofit together back in 2016, and it turned out that the people that I got involved with were maybe not up, on the same level that I was, and that I found out that some of them that I thought were going to be on my board maybe wanted to use the nonprofit to launder money.
Oh,
So
my God.
thankfully, it didn't work out. And a few years later, in 2020, I was invited to a meeting of certified cannabis educators through Stacy Boback and Stephanie Massey, who were both breast cancer survivors and had come to cannabis through their illness, and learned so much, and experienced such great things through it, that they wanted to share their knowledge as well. They became certified, and so we had this first meeting in 2020, and there were about a dozen of us around the table. And I was a little hesitant at first, but once I got to hear everybody's stories, which are generally as patients, right? We're patients
Hmm.
first when we come to this plant. Usually we're desperate and at the end of our ropes. And then we make a connection and we have success, and it drives us to want to share that knowledge with others. So we came around this sort of water cooler together, exchanged our stories, and then eventually I shared with them my business plan of Educann Nation as a nonprofit, and we launched officially in 2020, and have been, I'll say, growing strong ever since, getting the good word of cannabis out there.
Shauna, it's an absolutely wonderful story. How can people get in touch with you?
You can find us on our website, which is educannation.info. So that's
Hmm.
educannation.info. You can reach me with email at educannationinc@gmail.com. You can probably find me on Facebook too, but I'm not really out there elsewhere on social media.
It was wonderful to talk to you, you rebel, you, and I re- I enjoy your story, and I think what you've gone through as a mother is really commendable. And I mean, the first thing you want to do is protect your child, and you've done that. You've done that extremely well. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Are you looking for quality RSO or have questions about how to take it? Al Moranton with MyFit Life is our new trusted wellness partner. and Al is offering something really special for you. A completely free 30-minute consultation to discuss your specific health challenges. Al will give you honest advice about his cannabis products and wellness supplements that might help your situation. Ready to get real answers? Go to myfitlife.net/cannabis health to schedule your free consultation and mention Cannabis Health Radio to receive 20% off anything you decide is right for you. Thank you for listening to Cannabis Health Radio.
Thanks for tuning in. You can find more information and check out all our past episodes at cannabishealthradio.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and follow us on social media and our Rumble channel. This podcast is listener supported, so if you've found it helpful, please consider making a donation, big or small, right on our site. And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Leaving a quick review also helps others discover us. We really appreciate you being here. Thanks again.